What is up, guys? Welcome back to another monthly wrap-up, but this time it's for October, which was a very fun reading month. We have 12 to talk about today. 12? 11. There was one DNF, so I think it's 11. First one was actually a DNF, and it was Immortal Dark. There wasn't anything particularly wrong with this one. It was one of those ones I had to put down just because I think I just had like a lot on my mind. And I feel like there was a lot of exposition happening at the beginning, and so it didn't quite grab me right away like I was hoping it would have. It is a vampire book, and it's fairly long. It's like a 17-hour audiobook, and for whatever reason, because of all the exposition that was happening in the beginning and it just didn't immediately grab me, I was like, okay, I think I'm gonna pause on this one, maybe come back to it. I haven't circled back to it yet for October. Maybe I will by the end of the year. If you've read that one, let me know if it's worth my time. And I knew I had several other vampire books to get to this month, which are in here and are coming up. So I think I was just like, I was so antsy to get to the other stuff that because it didn't immediately intrigue me and I knew I had 17 hours of it to sit through, I was like, I don't want to do this right now. So I did DNF that one. But then I picked back up with some poetry, with quite a bit of poetry. I haven't read poetry in like a month, and then I blitzed through 3 poetry books because I was at that writing workshop, which was like down in Quartz Mountain, which is in southwest Oklahoma. And it's very much like you are just surrounded by nature. There's a lodge right on the lake, and so it makes sense for me to read some kind of poetry. And I started with Swan while I was at that writing retreat, and then I can't remember if I started Redbird or if I didn't quite get to it, maybe like the next week after. And then we also went somewhere for fall break. We went down to like the Broken Bow area. We just did like 2 nights in a cabin. So again, I was like surrounded by these beautiful trees and it was just so quiet, and I just find myself called to like nature poetry whenever I'm surrounded, you know, in nature or by nature. So these are both Mary Oliver. And then I did get to A Joy Harjo. I am so close to being done with all of her work. It's like not even funny. This month it was Weaving Sundown in a Scarlet Light, 50 Poems for 50 Years. I think most of them were like poems I'd read before, but just collected into this volume, but with commentaries. There is a whole section in the back just with her commentary on why she wrote them, the significance of them, what she was going through at the time. I think that's so fascinating because all throughout my reading of her work, that's been something that I'm like, I know that I'm kind of missing is like her interpretation and why she wrote it, and all of the references that I'm not getting because I just don't know who the people are or what event she's talking about. This would be a good place for you to start. Instead of kind of going in blind and just like taking in the poems as you can, you have commentary in the back that kind of guides you along, which I found super helpful. So we have one more down and a few more to go for Joy Harjo. That rhymed. Wasn't my favorite. I had some issues with this. The Deer and the Dragon by Piper CJ. I picked this up for aesthetic reasons, I'm not gonna lie. And I need to kind of stop doing that because I should have known this was gonna be kind of like an SJM vibe. Like it's that style of writing. We have like fae and angels and demons and that kind of thing, but it's in a contemporary setting. And so for whatever reason, I think I'm learning, like when I read A Court of Thorns and Roses and didn't like it at all. There's something about that that's like just not my favorite. The problems that I had with this was our main character is like an escort. There's a disclaimer at the very beginning of the book that says the author is trying to destigmatize sex work. The problem is that she doesn't destigmatize it at all. She romanticizes it and turns it into this the way she puts it forth in this book is very much like it's this fabulous jet-setting lifestyle and you're gonna have men spending $600 on you for dinner. The amount of time she mentions her BMW, like that she drives her BMW, it's just very annoying. And my main issue was that the main character, Marlowe, she is very narcissistic. I don't love ego. I don't love it in real life people and I don't love it in my fictional characters, and she was just annoying. She says, I wish the others could see what I saw reflected back in the glossy golden elevator banks as I approached in my designer clothes, flanked on either side by gorgeous otherworldly men. I was having a celebrity moment and the pedestrians were missing out. Yeah, yikes. It's so bad that it seems like she's satirizing this style of writing. Is she genuinely writing like that? I hope not. I hope it's supposed to be like, maybe that little paragraph was like sort of a paragraph of satire. Because if it wasn't, oh baby. Everything was made of starlight. Eyes were made of starlight. That one kind of makes sense. Smiles were made of starlight. I don't get that. Voices being made of starlight. I don't get that. She could see angels and demons. That's kind of the thing that makes her unique. Anyway, she discovers that what she thought was just like an imaginary boyfriend is actually like basically the son of Satan. He's like the prince of hell is how he's described in the blurb. So I'm not giving anything away. Anyway, she has to go find him. Like, is he in this limbo state? Is he in hell? Like, you know, and then so of course she needs a couple of buddies to kind of guide her along. I feel like the battleground that the blurb mentions that makes this sound like it's going to be such a fun ride, that I feel like just didn't happen. Like, I feel like that just did not come to fruition. Most of this, when I think about this book, I just imagine them like sitting in the car or sitting at a coffee shop talking. Like, that is a lot of this book. I felt like a lot of this book was them sitting around explaining the world to her. And even the people who are like her like sidekick Fauna, she's supposed to be like a fae. She looks like a fawn. Like, her face is literally kind of spotted up like a fawn. Is kind of rude and constantly calls her a dumbass for not knowing things about this world when like she's new to this world. Like, we don't know what's going on. Like, that's the whole point, is like you're supposed to be telling her about the world of angels and demons. Always has her like Starbucks name on the cup. She has the barista put like Her Majesty, stuff like that. That was just like kind of sort of funny the first time, and then it happens a second time and you're like, girl, it's not funny anymore. It feels a little bit like autofic because there's a lot of references in here that made me think, are you talking about yourself? So Marlowe, the main character, is an author. Yeah, her career as an author, queer identity, her religious trauma, which she talks about at the back, parental drama, interest in folklore. It's like very much like the main character is a stand-in for the author, and I've never loved that. Marlowe kind of loses, she goes a little bit like transparent, and it's like I can kind of see the author standing behind her, if that makes any sense, and so it just takes me out of the story. So I think I gave this one 2 stars, 2.5 stars, something like that. Sarah J. Maas fans, if you are looking for something new to sink your teeth into, this could be it for you. This may be your favorite thing. It was not for me. I'm gonna have to start moving so much quicker if we're gonna get through all of this in a timely manner. So next up was So Thirsty. This was an audiobook. I'm gonna talk about this one really quickly because it wasn't my absolute favorite. We basically have a main character. She's sort of like the grumpy millennial, complaining about turning 35, something like that. She's in her like mid-30s. Her name is Sloane. She's spending her birthday at this like waterfront resort, but complaining about it. So very much like first world problems, moaning and groaning, but really has like no reason to complain. With her wild card best friend, Naomi. Of course, there always has to be like the crazy best friend who gets them into a little bit of trouble. And so she drags her to this mansion, and they don't realize that the people inside the mansion are vampires. So there's like a little coven of vampires. I think there's like 3 of them inside this mansion. And so what ends up happening, the one thing that you can assume ends up happening. So I'm not going to say what the little twist is, but obviously you can imagine because it's a vampire book, and it's called So Thirsty. So wasn't the biggest fan of this. I did give this 2 stars. This was another kind of low rating one for me. I just felt like the main character, is really whiny and kind of like the wet blanket, and that's just not super fun to read about. If she had kind of changed and had sort of like a character arc, maybe a little bit faster, I would have been more into it. Yeah, she was just very, again, kind of like an annoying main character. There is a romance in this. We have a sexy vampire named Henry. For me, it bloomed so fast, like it just came out of nowhere, and it was very much like all lustful, and it wasn't, there wasn't anything for me to actually cling to in terms of like a genuine connection that they seem to have. There was no like depth to it. It was very much just like, ooh, sexy vampire. This again was very much exposition-y. I think that was my main issue with it, was we've all seen vampire movies. We've all read vampire books. We get it. When a vampire, when a human becomes a vampire and that change first happens, we all know that they have this sort of like blood craze. It's always called like bloodlust, blood rage, blood, whatever, right? And it's like they kind of go into a frenzy. So much of this book is about that. It's literally the title. It's called So Thirsty. And I mean, we just read for so long, so many pages and pages of just that, of just them being thirsty. Like, I don't know how many times you can just say that over and over and over again. Like, I felt like I was reading the same thing over and over again. You know, it made it a little bit more interesting because it wasn't like other vampire things that maybe we had read before. This is very much just like same. I was over it by the time it was over. So that's So Thirsty. Next up, we have one that I thoroughly enjoyed. This is Woodworm by Layla Martinez. The author's from Spain. She's a Spanish author, and so this will work for my Reading Around the World challenge as well. So it was kind of two birds with one stone. And I did thoroughly enjoy this. This one ended up getting 4 stars. Basically, we are following a grandma and the granddaughter. We kind of switch back and forth between their perspectives. And they are surviving in a village of people that really don't like them. Very much We've Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. Very much same vibe. So if you liked We've Always Lived in the Castle, you're probably really gonna like this. Like I said, it's a haunted house story, but it takes on this like really physical sensation, and there's a lot about shadows and shadows of like hands and feet coming out of drawers and that kind of thing. It felt very tangible. It doesn't feel just like a typical sort of haunted house ghost story. There's something about it that feels like it's literally gonna come out and grab you, and I loved that. I liked that it kind of took a slightly different turn. It's super short, so I do recommend. I mean, you could probably do this in one sitting if you really wanted to. I love an author using their time really well, and obviously it's paced super quick because it's so short. I really appreciated the metaphors of the house's emotions as well. That was something that I enjoyed in terms of like the prose. Like, the house is so much more than a setting. Arguably, it's like you could almost say it's like the most important character. The personification of the house, I think, was my favorite thing. But then we also do have a lot of tension between the grandma and the grandmother. This isn't a perfect, happy relationship. Also, thematically, this book has probably been one of the best books I've ever read to take the concept of female rage. We have like a whole slew of you know, it's almost like it's its own genre now. This was one of the ones that just does it so well. There's a good, solid story behind why the women feel this way. There is domestic abuse in this. It talks a lot about class. I think classicism is probably one of the biggest themes. It was all discussed very, very neatly in a very little small package. So 4.5 stars. Next up was Academy for Liars by Alexis Henderson. This is about a girl named Lennon, and she is accepted into Drayton University, which is this very like prestigious school where people are learning that they have magical abilities. It's a dark academic book, which is the reason why I picked it up in the first place, despite seeing kind of like mixed reviews. And she learns the power of persuasion. So all of the people at this school, that's the ability that they have. It starts off just very strange because when she gets the call, this like mysterious telephone call that she has been selected or chosen, she's like, I didn't apply for anything. Like, you obviously have the wrong number. But she like goes to the interview anyway. So it starts off very bizarre. I'm like, girl, why would you? She drives like 8 hours to go interview. That was just very strange to me that she goes at all. So that's kind of how we start off. And the reason why it was only a 3 stars, I couldn't put my finger on it at first, and then I watched a couple of other reviews, and Carrie Can Reads here on YouTube kind of summed it up pretty perfectly, and she said there's no stakes. The stakes are too low. The highest stake or risk that they explained to her is like, well, if you decide that, you know, it's not for you or whatever, we have to erase your memory of us so that you can't like tell the world that we exist. And then, but you know, you can just like go back to your life as normal. Anyway, the thing that kind of makes her special or kind of sets her apart from all the other students is that she realizes that she can open portals by going through the elevator. And so obviously that makes her like very cool and very different, and also potentially a weapon. She has more power than what they actually thought she did. So I did like that aspect of it. It felt a little bit long. We got a lot of characters, and they kind of all felt, I think maybe because I was listening to the audiobook and the narrator didn't differentiate too much between at least any of the female characters. It felt kind of like everybody was, I was like, wait, who, okay, that's this friend, and then that's the other, like, I was trying to keep everybody straight in my head, all the other students, because there was no differentiation of like the voice. She also doesn't really get close to anyone. She even admits to that. Like, she kind of has her walls up and she's not really letting anybody in. And so there has to be, like, at the heart of any story, at the core is like a relationship. That's the only thing that's going to keep me interested in a story, is the characters. It doesn't really matter what's happening in the plot. She has some relationships with like a few of the male characters, but it's kind of like, it's like a very casual kind of thing. It doesn't make like a really good best friend of any of the female characters. So I felt like it was kind of lacking there as well. Like, there was no real good solid core relationship for me to feel for. And so I think that's where it fell flat for me. Fragile Animals was next. So this feels like, it's a vampire novel, but it feels kind of like a gritty indie film set on a random little island in Scotland. So it's very much different than So Thirsty, like totally different vibes. It's a lot quieter, it's a lot more self-reflective. We're following a main character, her name is Noelle, and she's left the church. She's no longer Catholic, she's an ex-Catholic. And she's basically going to this island to try to kind of get away from life, get away from her family, kind of do some self-reflection. She's kind of struggling with her sexuality. She's not totally sure what's happening. Basically, she's having a quarter-life crisis. And so at this very small little bed and breakfast, there's only one other room, and the other room has been rented out to a man named Moses, who's a vampire. He just straight up tells her, like within a couple of conversations of meeting her, that he's a vampire. And their whole friendship kind of starts, it turns into more than just a friendship, but their whole friendship starts because they are basically ranting about their lovers. And their dialogue between each other is just talking about people who they've known in the past and had relationships with in the past. So this very much focuses on Noelle and her, it's kind of plumbing the depths of her psyche. So we go back in time a lot. It flashes back to memories of her being in the church, of her kind of falling in love with one of her like female coworkers and struggling with those feelings for the first time. And so I really struggled because I wanted to be in the present moment with Moses. Him having that name, like a biblical name, like I wanted to know more about him. She breaks into his room at one point in time and sees that there's like dirt under his bed, which is very much like a Dracula kind of thing where he has to sleep on top of like soil from his home country or whatever. And so I wanted to know more about him, and ultimately it's very much about Noelle and her figuring herself out. So that was like a little bit frustrating because every time we would go back to another memory, I was like, I just want you to go out by the lake again with Moses and like talk to each other, and like I wanted that relationship to grow and bloom more than it ultimately really did. And then it does turn more intimate like later on. It doesn't really feel like a typical vampire novel at all. It doesn't really feel that bloody and gory. There are some really beautiful lines in here though. I feel like she could be a poet. Like there are some images in here that are just so powerful and so strong, like I can still picture them. So I really liked the writing. So you might pick it up honestly just for that. If you are looking for like a really proper vampire novel, this isn't it, but it was still very good and I still really liked it even though it wasn't what I was expecting. That was Fragile Animals. Next up was more of like a proper horror novel, and that was This Thing Between Us by Gus Moreno. This is about Tiago, and his wife has just passed away. I'm not ruining anything, that's in the blurb. There's weird things happening with their like home speaker. It's kind of like an Alexa, like an Amazon Alexa smart speaker thing. They have one, and it's doing strange things. Like that's kind of how the story starts. It opens with her funeral, but then we learn that it's speaking out of turn, it's saying strange things and doing things without being prompted to. And so that's kind of like what leads us into the story. And it really had me in a chokehold. I think I said that in the reading vlog that I did for this one. The pacing on this one was probably one of the best that I read all month. It really just gets crazier and crazier and crazier. There's a dog at one point in time that there's like sort of like a Cujo moment with the dog. There's like a fry cook from a diner that kind of morphs into this creature. At one point in time, we have the mother-in-law, and there's a scene like where we don't really know if we can trust her. there's just a lot happening that feels very like Thiago's going crazy and we don't know if he can be trusted because we don't know if he's just going crazy from grief. There's a lot about like the spirit world, and he's questioning like, is it demonic possession? There were some 2001 A Space Odyssey references in here, so if you liked that movie, or it was a book, I read the book too, but yeah, if you liked that book or movie, you might really like this. I can tell he was heavily inspired because there's like a stone, like a big stone wall, almost like one of the Stonehenge stones that he sees in the field behind this cabin that he rents to try to like get away from everything, get away from life. And it's like there and it's not there, or it will like move positions or something. He tries to like drive his truck through it at one point in time and it like turns into smoke. Like it's just one of those books where you don't really know if what's happening is legitimately happening because we don't know that we can trust the validity of the main character's mental state. By the end, it's just nuts. Like, it's one of those books that just is so, you're just going along for the ride, and it's like a roller coaster that you can't stop. I think I gave this 4 stars. Yeah, 4.5 stars. I really liked it. The main kind of theme for sure is grief. The author did lose somebody. I think it mentions it in the acknowledgments. And then also our reliance on technology. I think the blurb says something like, our all too real oppressive intimacy of technology. One of those books that's kind of warning us against being too reliant on all of our tech. So, and that definitely comes through. It's very strong. So I liked this one a lot. Such a short little novel. Did you guys read this one? ML Rio's latest, Graveyard Shift. It's a novella and it really should have been longer. I feel like this was one of those situations where like the publisher must have been pressuring her to turn in pages or something, because it just ends. It just cuts off, and all of the low star ratings that I've read for this talk about how it just ends. It just ends, and we don't know. It's 130 pages of awesomeness, and then it builds up to kind of nothing, and there's like no real payoff. Like, I feel like this should be like the first 130 pages of a longer work. So yeah, I didn't love the ending. If you guys feel like you knew where that ending was going, please comment or DM me and let me know what you think was happening, because I don't know. I mean, I have like a couple of theories, of course, that I could like extrapolate from what we do know, but I feel like the author didn't give us enough for us to like really grab onto anything in particular. Basically, we're following 5 characters. They're all night shift workers in this like college town, and they're meeting in the cemetery for like a smoke break at midnight. Basically, they see like a grave that's been dug for all of these lab rats. It's like a mass grave, and one of the characters is the editor-in-chief of the college paper. And so of course there's a story there, because that's not how you dispose of rats. There's like a proper protocol. Obviously there's a story. And so I think we start at midnight and we end at like 10 a.m. in the morning. So over the course of the next 10 hours, 5 of them all kind of help each other uncover what's going on. And it does have to do with mushrooms, as you can tell from the cover. I loved the characters. They were very specific and unique. They all had their own personalities. I loved characterization. There's a few really cool like descriptions in here. So the writing is decent, but it was just too short. I felt like it was one of those situations where publisher must have just been like, you need to give us something, and so this is what she came up with, but it feels like the beginning of something bigger, and I did not appreciate it just ending the way that it did, because I feel like that it cheats the reader just a little bit. There's a difference between like an open ending and then there's just like ending it in the middle of a scene, and I feel like that's kind of what we got. So this, I think, was like 3 stars because of that. So not horrible, but also not great. And then lastly, we have one of the funnest ones. This was my Halloween night read. So this is why this video is coming like a couple days late, because I started this on Halloween night and then just ripped through it over the course of the couple days after that. This is Slewfoot by Brom. He did the writing, like the story, and then also the illustrations that are inside as well, which are wonderful. I feel like this is begging to be a graphic novel. It would be so good. I would totally read the whole story over again in a heartbeat. Again, the pacing was so good on this one. But we have a young woman named Abatha, this very bold kind of spitfire redhead, and she is trying to survive in puritanical New England. So the year is 1666, and she's living in Connecticut, and she's got a husband named Edward, and she's just trying to live a life biting her tongue constantly because she's very opinionated. They weren't really allowed to have any kind of opinion at all. But her husband dies immediately. In like the first scene, I think, the goat gets loose, and so he goes into like the back of a cave and falls down a pit where the goat presumably died as well, and he like falls down the pit and breaks his neck or something. So she's left as a widow literally from like day one. Her really only other option then becoming like an indentured servant to Edward's brother, who's not a very nice guy, is to try to work the land herself. Basically, nobody thinks she's going to be able to, you know, bring anything from the land on her own. So soon enough, a forest spirit, I don't know exactly what to call him, Slewfoot, I guess is what I should call him. But he kind of emerges from the forest. Let me find the picture of him. This is Slewfoot. He kind of emerges from the forest and doesn't really know who he is. So he uncovers his identity and things that have happened to him as the novel goes on. And there's sort of a big climactic kind of revelation later on in the story. So he doesn't even really know who he is, but he knows that he can help her. He basically like says some words and corn starts growing instantly. She's like, that's awesome, but also I know you're gonna need some sort of payment. So like I'm not giving up my soul to you because clearly you're some sort of devil or something. He's really not portrayed as sort of a devil right away, but obviously things are revealed as time goes on. So they do kind of strike up a friendship. And because she's doing so well, and she's all of a sudden she's thriving, all of the Puritans in town, all of the villagers are like, you're a witch. There are so many wrongs done to her in this, and a line that all the magistrates and the reverends and basically all the males in the town, the male villagers say, angels must often do dark deeds in the name of the Lord. So that's kind of like the line that they use to justify basically trying to utterly destroy Abatha, and it's very much a commentary on puritanical New England and how their own religious zealotry, is that a word? Their own religious ideologies, extreme religious ideologies, and fear turned people, normal people, into demons or witches. This book is very much like kind of throwing it back at them and saying, no, actually you're the monsters because of all the horrible things that you were doing to innocent people. It was excellent. Pacing was good. The vibes were there. Loved all the characters. The dialogue felt legit, like it felt real for the time. And it really is a revenge story. I don't know that it was 5 stars. I'll say it's 5 stars. It was pretty good. It was pretty perfect, I would say, actually. I liked it a lot. If you guys made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I hope you had a wonderful reading month this October. And I will see you in my next video. Bye, guys.